What happened this morning? Did you forget again? Did you forget?
Kind of.
It's okay. I'll judge you, but just lightly.
Forgot to wake up this morning.
I just don't know how how you don't drink caffeine, because I would not function without coffee right now. I streamed last night until I want to say 1, and then was up at 6:45. So I'm like, okay, I can have a conversation, and that's about it. And then we'll go from there. If you're good, sir, then let's kick this thing off.
I'm good, man. Let's go.
All right, the recording's going, which means we can welcome people in, pretend to be awake, and say,
okay, hang on,
you suck. What did you do? What did you screw up?
No, I was playing
Audio?
around with the audios. You're good now. You were way into the red, so you may want to
dial that down.
Bit. Yeah, just may want to redo just your first little intro.
Well, it happens. We're gonna you know what, we're gonna keep it. I'll figure it out in post, because at this point people are interested and they're like, what did you do? What did you break? And it's like, no, I just said welcome on into the Snap.fan Podcast. For those who do not know, my name is Guest, also known as ItsGuestGaming, and the technical issue / director over to my side is DefaultDan. Good morning. How are you?
Morning, man. Just waking up, getting in here, but doing good, man. Excited about all of the stuff that's coming to the game. We've got a huge patch next week. Just ready for it, man.
Yeah, I feel like we need this patch in a variety of different ways, because I mean, we could talk the spotlight caches to death. Those are going to happen. We've put out information. We've put it up on Snap.fan. Everybody's trying to figure out and orchestrate and get everything. Look, we've kind of exhausted all of the what's coming questions at this point, and now we just need it to happen. And outside of that is the stuff that I'm now interested in, because, we've got, like you said, it's not just spotlight caches. It's a straight up standard patch, which means we go nuts at Snap.fan looking into, what new information is in the game. But then on top of that, the game itself changes, because we always get some kind of tweak with, OTA style adjustments, and then big card changes on top of it, or new news that we weren't expecting, like they pulled on us in the past. Like there's a lot to come. And I kind of wanted to, focus a little bit about that today, as well as talk Phoenix Force, because obviously we had the holiday weekend this past weekend. So we did not have a podcast on Monday night / Tuesday morning. So we're going to talk Phoenix Force, because I love how the narrative of Phoenix Force has also changed over the last week. Specifically, it has been fun to watch so many tails end up between their legs. Yeah, myself included.
I think it's one of those cards where, like, when it was first spoiled, it looked okay. But the problem was, when it was spoiled, everybody's mindset was the destroy deck, right? So you think about all the little stuff you kill. You think about the Nova, the Winter Soldier, the stuff that doesn't matter. And then you kind of like, we're going, okay, well, if we're not doing that, then it's something like, all right, turn 3, I play something, turn 4, I kill it. So turn 3 plays, in theory, right, especially prior to the experimentation we've been seeing, you're like, okay, well, what is big that's a 3? Maximus? Polaris? Like, it wasn't anything special. And then all of a sudden we got some really cool stuff. So I was excited to see when it came out. It was much better than I think any of us were to have anticipated. And again, I know that first night we started to see some lists come out. I know Jay Hugs went infinite with his version of it, which I was playing, and I found a lot of fun as well. But it was leveraging these move cards. And yes, move is in the text of Phoenix Force, but like, I don't really think that totally crossed a lot of people's minds 2 months ago or a month ago, whenever Phoenix Force was kind of first spoiled, right? I don't think it was that. Now, I do think as we got closer, people started kind of thinking about it, but I think at the time that really wasn't what people were like visualizing with Phoenix Force.
Yeah, I think Phoenix Force has politely taken people by surprise, because like you said, when it was spoiled, spoiled, data mined, whatever word you prefer, uh, move was not big yet. We hadn't had the Spider-Verse season yet, and there was a very small niche group of people who were saying, yes, Ghost Spider is great, but wait for Phoenix Force, then the move season will take off, as weird as it was. And I was like, really? Okay, sure. But then looking at the combination of what you need to do to get it to happen, I'm like, that's a very small amount of things that really could be good, that you're wanting to destroy, yet alone wanting to be a move card that you destroy. But then seeing the options of how you play this package, it has been very surprising. One of my favorite things every single week is doing the day 2 article, where I sit down and I look at what creators did, and just the entire community as well, that have posted up decks with, the new cards, and say, here, I tried this worked. I tried this worked. I tried this, and look for new combos and synergies, because we knew pretty much, right away. Like in the first game I played with Phoenix Force, I knew I wanted to try the Human Torch combo of destroy, move and destroy Human Torch, get something crazy to happen, build it up, and then final turn it moves again, Heimdall, it moves again. Like there's just it ramps up to, I got it to 72, which is absolutely insane, to say the minimum. So we knew that there was good potential in there. But then once we started looking at the consistency of multiple man, which is probably its number 1 target right now, you could use Dagger and Vulture, of course, as move and ramp, but I'm just liking the revive tactic in general. And it's basically making a Vision Plus. In my opinion, this card makes Vision pop up on the radar of, hey, Vision needs to be better, guys. Because now you could revive a squirrel that you've killed. And it's literally the exact same thing. You have a floating fiery squirrel. Imagine that imagery if you're on audio podcast right now. Like, that's what's happening here. And that means anything else is an improvement. So I think, when you put it into a couple of different decks, that have those move/destroy combo mechanics, you realize that you don't even need it to ramp, really. Even just on a turn 5, getting a second Iceman to come back and hit that card that they were about to use in 2-card combo, like hitting that Wasp, for example, like that's a pretty big effect. And I have been pleasantly surprised at seeing some of the decks that people have put out with Phoenix Force. But I guess the only downside is it feels like it's its own archetype. It feels like Phoenix Force has to be in one specific deck, and that's a Phoenix Force deck.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree at this point. Like, it's one of those things where, like you're mentioning, doing those crazy plays, and I do think that multiple man is probably the best version of it right now. So if you guys don't know, you're multiple manning on 2. You were killing it on 3 with like a Venom. That way you're not losing any of your power. And then potentially one of the highest returns you can do is Shuri on 4 into Phoenix Force on 5. That way your Phoenix Force is coming back with the 6+ multiple man and doubling, and then you get to move it, right? And then all of a sudden now you have 2 Phoenix Forces, and you move it, potentially again with like a Heimdall, Ghost Spider, or something like that, giving you even more. So yeah, there's a lot of these crazy tactics with it, but I would agree with you. It's not a plug and play card. So a lot of, like, again, when I look at this, I don't think Phoenix Force is broken or busted in any way, right? When we look back at like Zabu, and we look back at like, these cards that just truly define the meta, Shuri, right? Like Shuri, Zabu, these cards that were like way too good because they could plug into any deck, right? You could throw Shuri just with any big card after it. And of course we found the Shuri Red Skull, whatever, but like those had to be changed and modified because they were just way, way, way too strong. Whereas I feel like this one, and I know we've said this, we talked about this the other day, it's more like Nimrod in the fact that it's very strong. It can do its thing, but it has to be in a certain deck. Like, you can't throw it in every deck because you don't know if they're going to Shang-Chi your card, right? And most people Shang-Chi on turn 6 anyway, so it's not going to really help you that much. But it's definitely one of those cards that I think was created very well. I mean, I could see it getting, if anything, I could see it getting like changed to a 5/5, just because it's already getting that little bit of extra from reviving the card and the effect and things like that. So I could see it getting tweaked a little bit, but I don't foresee the card like really getting any kind of overhaul like we saw with Shuri and Zabu and the other problematic, season passes. And even with that, I think that's like 2 months from now, if somebody finds even more, things to do with Phoenix Force, with potential new cards coming out and things like that. But I would agree with you. It kind of is its own deck. It's kind of its own archetype. Like we saw with Nimrod and the Destroy, it wasn't just slotted into a Destroy deck. It was slotted into a Nimrod Destroy deck, which was much different than the current Death Wave, style deck that we saw before.
Right. I know this sounds bizarre, but hear me out on this. If Phoenix Force dropped into the game as a big bad, I would not have been mad about it. I think Phoenix Force is a unique enough card and archetype that it stands alone in its own archetype. Like a Galactus deck, it has to be a deck focused around Galactus.
Yeah.
That whether you pull it, that's your number one play mechanic. If you don't, you have a backup routine. Thanos, same thing. It's its own deck archetype where you need it to have other specific cards that either reinforce the stones, kill the stones, ongoings, whatever, whichever version of it you like to play. If you play a Thanos deck, you understand. We still don't talk about Kang. High Evolutionary, I'm sorry, Kang needs love. We may add him into a conversation later. Same thing, High Evolutionary. It's a 3 to 4 card combo that you have to factor into the deck because you're building the rest of the deck then around the other outs. Phoenix Force is exactly like those. And I truly think that as a season pass, it's one of the better value cards because like we compare it to Nimrod because it was a season pass. Yes, it is very narrow in its use case and you build around that use case, just like the big bads versus some of the other, sorry.
Well, and going off that just for 1 second with the Nimrod, I think if Nimrod would have came in as a 5/6, I think he would have had just as much impact. I think that's what we're seeing now in Nimrod. The deck works. The deck is good because of that one extra power. I know that's weird, but when you're killing him multiple times, that one extra power is 2 or 3 or 4 power. It makes a big difference to where I think if he would have came in at a 5/6, we would have saw just as much of an impact as this card. So I just want to throw that out there because I know a lot of people still look at Nimrod back when he was released as kind of being this meh card when he came in as a season pass card. But I think if you look at him now, and this is even like pre-Phoenix Force, like coming into the game, right? I know I used them at World Snap Federation a couple months ago, and it felt like a week ago or 2 weeks ago. For some reason, everybody, like I'm sure some creator made a video, but like everybody started playing it for a little while, and he was like really popping up. So I know we're talking about Phoenix Force, but I want to make sure if anybody's listening, they're like, oh, but Nimrod's not that good. Like if you've played against a good Nimrod player, he's got some good stuff. So
yeah, Nimrod needs the love, but I feel like being that it's such a later play for Nimrod, that was why so many people were offset because of where Galactus was in its meta.
Yeah,
Galactus was because Nimrod's best deck is still Galactus, hands down, in my opinion. There are Nimrod focused destroy decks, but Nimrod overall, if you have to make a deck, if you had to say, I'm going to build a Nimrod deck, what kind of deck am I building? I'm typically focusing on the Galactus mechanic first, destroy mechanic second, not destroy mechanic first, followed by some other variation, even though he's in my deck of the week this week, for example.
But I don't know. If Nimrod, Galactus is a fail-safe worst case. I think if Galactus still was the way he was, then maybe I think now it's a lot harder to get Galactus off.
Yeah,
because of
but that's my point though, because with the way Galactus works now, it's more about embracing the turn 6 for Nimrod versus back then, which was just get Galactus out as fast as possible. Put them out with Electro on turn 5, and then you prioritize that over Nimrod. Go. Nimrod's use cases were lower. Now they're higher. Phoenix Force, I feel like, makes a stronger impact because it's way more relevant in its current meta to get it out on 5, to bring back something that was typically of 3 cost or lower. And there's only certain cards that mega benefit, but there are a lot of cards that can mildly benefit from the revival as well. So Phoenix Force decks are incredibly strong. The first deck I used, I climbed 20 ranks in 4 hours and was absolutely fantastic.
I also feel like with that, and I know we're going to look at your deck of the week a little bit later too, one you've been kind of experimenting with. I think the other side of that though is because I climbed 10 ranks, I think, with my Phoenix Force decks, like right when it started, because a lot of people figured out these move decks. It's a really good deck. It's getting a lot of people to infinite, but I also feel like this is one of the, I would say almost like one of the first season pass cards or whatever kind of card you want to name it, that, because it could be just a new release or whatever. Like, I feel like this is one of the newest cards where like it came out and it was quote unquote figured out really quickly. Like the quote unquote best deck was figured out really, really quickly with it, to where there was so many people out there that had no idea what you were doing. And then by the time they saw your multiple man like flipping out and like making all these different copies, it was like, oh crap, I can't beat this. There's nothing I can do about it. Like and I think that's one of the reasons. Now, I think it's a little harder today. So again, we're a couple days into the release of Phoenix Force. It's a little bit harder now than it was day one with her. She's still really good, and they still just have to have the answers. But it's definitely one of those that I feel like day one, this deck, you could climb so quickly with, because so many people just didn't know what you were doing. They didn't know how to counter it or anything like that. And now it's slightly harder. So just keep in mind when you're listening or you're watching any of these Phoenix Force videos going into this weekend, going into next week, it's going to continually get harder to be able to do those 20 cube climbs, 30 cube climbs, even though it's still possible. You just have to understand the deck, know how to do it, and know when to retreat is kind of the big key. But again, don't want to take anything away from your 20 cubes. I just want to throw it out there because I know a lot of people I've been seeing now, like yesterday, today,
cubes, on ranks, friend, ranks. Sorry. And then I did another matches. 10 last night cubes, with the deck of the week.
Cubes in the matches, ranks coming out. I'm just saying, like in general, like just keep that in mind, because I know I've been seeing a lot of people like yesterday and today complaining about like, I can't ever get this deck to work. It's like, just be careful. It's still a really good deck. It's still really, but you have to know when to retreat and when to kind of go all in on the deck. So
yeah, anyway. I feel like, even though you say the best Phoenix Force deck has been figured out, I disagree. I think that we are still trying to refine the variations that work most consistently. And in my opinion as well, Phoenix Force still at the moment, whilst being very competitive, is not necessarily the best conquest deck, because it's very much so a forecastable deck. You can see which line they're going when, and there are several different cards that counter it, that if you happen to run up against them and that's your primary play is the Phoenix Force mechanic, you're kind of screwed. Like, someone plays out their if they have a Yondu in their deck, forget about it.
Yeah.
Because the targeting then is cut in half. I've been seeing a couple people that I've gone up with that have successfully laid out a Negasonic Teenage Warhead where they knew Phoenix Force was dropping. I'm like,
I've done that, not Negasonic, but like I've ran a lockdown deck a couple times, and I've been able to catch them with Professor X. And like, even though I'm like, I'm not going to win this lane, I'm like, you're not going to get your multiple man combo. And I just literally just play Professor X to catch it. I've done, which is also a little flavor text there. Professor X, Phoenix, all of that, if you watch the animated series. But between that, Cosmo, on some stuff, like, again, there are ways to stop it, especially if you know what you're doing. So again, Cosmo kind of not making a comeback, but I've seen him in a couple Surfer decks floating back in. And, that's one of those cards where for the last month and a half, Cosmo, I guess he just fell asleep in the doghouse because nobody could find Cosmo. And there was some decks running amok with no Cosmos. So I think as the meta shifts, we're going to see some answers like you're mentioning. Yondu disappeared for a long time. When Deathwave went away, Yondu went away. And now we're starting to see him pop back up as a disruptor because he's still just like Iceman, just like Spider Ham and these cards, they're all closely related, but they're all different. And I think with Phoenix Force being a huge card, if you're debating what you're doing on turn 1 and you don't know if it's Spider Ham, if you don't know it's Iceman, Yondu is a good fill-in for decks on your one spot curve, especially if you're not those energy saving Nebula Sunspot, style decks.
Yeah, I agree. I think Phoenix Force has made all of us kind of, chew our cud and keep our mouths shut and just surprised us. It was pretty unanimous across the board of, Phoenix Force, okay, sure, whatever.
Yeah.
And then after about 48 hours of its existence, like I said, myself included, so many people in the community went, oh, damn, this is fun. This is cool. Oh, I found this play. Ooh, I could run this combo with it also. And it's been pleasantly surprising because I was worried that this was going to be a dud of a season pass. Yeah. I was a little worried about it.
The only thing I'd add is you mentioned before, and I like your point of if Phoenix Force wasn't a season pass, if Phoenix Force was this month's big bad, right? Rather than that, how we would have felt about it. And to be honest, I kind of at a level agree with you in the fact that what Phoenix Force does is unique. There's no card that can revive a card. And that would kind of, make it stand out. Phoenix Force as a character, the Phoenix is a huge, powerful, character in the X-Men mythos. So I would agree in that, but I would want to disagree with you in the fact that I want one more card that can do something like this. If you think about discard, we have Ghost Rider plus we have Hela, right? Hela bringing back all discarded cards, Ghost Rider bringing back one discarded card. So Phoenix Force is the Ghost Rider to destroy. And I really feel like we need one more card. And I don't think we need a destroy Hela. I think that would be way too powerful when you think of
Lamentus would be amazing.
Right. That null, right? We destroy all these cards, you got a giant null, plus you have something that brings them all back, and null is still
my
big.
God. That'd be great.
But I do feel like there needs to be one other bring a destroy card back, and maybe it works slightly different. Maybe it's something else, but I do feel like where you'd mentioned, them Yonduing you, or you mentioned when we were talking before, we were commentating on Wednesday Night Snap, right? The rock, the mines, not the mines. Yeah, collapsed mines. When that happens to you in a game, you're well, there goes my Phoenix Force because I'm probably bringing back the useless rock. So, it's still a 5/6 that can move, which is still fine. But, it's definitely one of those cards where I feel like it needs that one extra card to make it feel really, consistent. Again, the deck, if you build it correctly, you have to have a backup plan with it. But I think that's the problem right now is you're having to, do a Nimrod backup in your deck. You're having to do this other kind of whatever with it. And I think if you wanted to make a 100% Phoenix Force deck, it needs one other backup plan like we have with Discard. Discard has so many different paths that it can do right now. Whether you go Apocalypse, Hela, whatever, there's so many different avenues. And I feel like right now with this, Phoenix Force doesn't want you to null, right? Phoenix Force doesn't want you to death. It is the null, it is the death, right? Death and null work together, but Phoenix Force really doesn't have that other card unless you're saying it's multiple man, Human Torch, that kind of stuff.
I'm gonna spin your idea and throw this at you. What if it was not another revive card, but a targeted destroy from your hand? So basically Lady Sif for destroy.
Okay, so here's the thing. If I could, right, and I'm going to say it because I say it on every single thing, every single podcast. So, like in Magic.
Fuck.
Right? In Magic, you can have cards like that where you're like, when you play this, discard 2 cards, right? And you get to pick which 2 cards you did, or when you loot. So looting means discard a card, draw a card, but you get to pick the card you discard. I would love it if Gambit, you could target what you discarded, but instead would be what you destroyed in your hand. So I'm not saying rework Gambit. I'm just saying a card like that. So
yeah,
you get value in. I play this X0 or this X1. Doesn't have to have a lot with it. But it says I destroy a card in my hand. And you get to pick a card it destroys, or it can be random, whatever. I mean, it'd be way more powerful if you could pick. Maybe it's a 3-0. The 3-0, so literally you get no power on board, but you take away their power, and you destroy a card in your hand. So you have to have a card in your hand. Let's not make the Gambit mistake again. You have to have something in your hand that you destroy.
Yes.
Or it's like
to work.
Destroy a card with this power or this energy in your hand. Destroy another card on the board with equal or less power. That's a lot of Magic has a lot of mechanics like that. So like I like that. Discard a 5-drop. I can kill a 5-drop or less somewhere. Not discard it. It keeps destroy a card, a 5-drop or more.
Yeah.
Or
I'm
whatever.
Following you. I don't know if they are, but I'm following you.
I know. So I have a 5-drop in my hand. I destroy the 5-drop in my hand. I can destroy any card on their board that is 5-drop or less. I think that.
Yeah.
I like that. I like. Now that's very wordy, and maybe Snap community is not ready for that wordy of a card, but I think at some point Snap has to get to that level. I think in order to keep this game going,
so too.
we got to get into the weeds of let's make some crazier mechanics.
I mean, we've got 3 lines on Phoenix Force. So on reveal, choose a card from your hand, destroy an enemy card.
Destroy that card in hand.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, destroy an enemy card of that power or less, and your selected card.
Yeah.
Done. There. 3 lines. Okay. We can make it happen. But I like it. But that's going to require a major change. Those are going to change the cards entirely. And
right? We don't have targeting yet in any way into the game, and we need to add targeting.
Not yet. We can target our own cards. We can target cards that we choose to move, for example, and we can tap on Howard the Duck to see the next card. They're building these mechanics into the game, which kind of leads into, changes that we think are needed for the game as well. We'll start with the OTA style ones first, because OTA style changes are typically the fastest, typically the easiest, and are honestly getting harder. This was the hardest week, I think, yet of sitting through all of these cards and looking through them and going, okay, what needs just a number adjustment?
Come on, you say it's hard.
I do.
The Punisher is always your card of choice, so you always have your easy fallback.
Damn fucking right. Okay, and I'm gonna add on to it too. Okay, because Punisher, I'm still waiting for that 3/3. Okay, once it happens, then I'll shut up about it. But I'm gonna improv off of what I told you ahead of time to have ready, because we mentioned it earlier, and I'm gonna add on Vision because of Phoenix Force. I think Vision now has the right to go up to a 5/8 for that exact reason. I think now that you have so many different cards that you can destroy super early on, that Vision's value of being able to move from turn 5 to turn 6, why it doesn't have as much oomph to it. And Vision's always kind of that move card that everybody just leaves behind. except for the most recent open where people went, ooh, this could work with the Stegron combo as a backup plan on 5. But again, that's the key word. He's consistently a backup plan. So I could see Vision getting a little bit more power. I don't see 5.9, but I do see a 5.8 for him.
Yeah, I could see the 5.8. I think that potentially also opens up in a good way. I think it opens up a Shuri deck again. So now you have Shuri on this location, Vision on that location, next turn being able to move Vision plus Taskmaster, right? Like, 14 feels like I can't win a lane with 14, but 16, I can win a lane with 16, right? I know it's only 2 power, but like that 2 power makes a big difference when you're able to move Vision where you want to put them. And it makes it harder for them to, Shang-Chi it or whatever. Like, I would like
Think
that.
a Destroyer.
Like change. Yeah.
Think a Destroyer. Same thing. It's a Destroyer deck, where you armor a whole bunch of stuff and then Destroyer in a lane at 15. They brought Orca up from 14 to 16. Same thing. Same exact ideas. So I think Vision going up to a 5.8 to have that potential as a strong enough backup play, I think that 100% holds water. On the other end of the 5.8, 5.7 spectrum, I think it's time to say that MODOK needs to be actually brought down. I'm nominating MODOK going from a 5.8 down to a 5.7 because of the recent rise, and I blame us at Snap.fan, rise of Helidecks, because 2 months ago, we made it very clear to the community that Helidecks were the highest cube rate deck in the game, and still are. And MODOK decks, to make that combo pop off with Invisible One or whichever version you want to run, they're still incredibly strong. And to play out a 5.8 to get that 5.6, sorry, that turn 6 mechanic to pop off, that's a lot of power already on the board. And I think it's time that we say, MODOK, you need to calm down just a tad.
And I think it's, again, when we talk about the fall of certain cards, the shift of the meta, I think that's why the Helidecks were so good. So last season, I would agree with you because I went all the way to Infinite with the Hela deck. I threw in Living Tribunal because he had just popped out and all of that kind of stuff. But it's because Polaris isn't being played. It's because the Surfer deck in general is not being played. Cosmo, we talked about Cosmo disappearing for a month and a half, and that's the easy answer to this deck. They throw it on Invisible Woman, you throw it on Cosmo, bam, you can't do your combo anymore. Like, and that's the thing where, when you look at this, a lot of those decks like popped up and they were great because all their answers went away for that period of time. So yeah, I could see that though. I mean, 5.8, it's a really good card, and he's got a very big downside. I'm air quoting if you're listening to this on the podcast, but he's got a very bad downside if you're not playing Apocalypse, if you're not playing, because again, you can collector into this and have something like Swarm in your hand, right? And then all of a sudden your Swarms get super copied back in your hand. Like, there's a lot of these interactions that actually make him very strong if you're playing it correctly. So I would agree with you. I think that it's one of those things where a 5.7, not a big enough change that'll kill the deck or anything like that, but 8 power is a lot on a lane, and especially if you're already putting them behind a couple other cards, you're putting a lot of power in that lane, on top of the fact that you're about to just increase everything you want to do in your hand when you play them. So I could see that one. I could see that change.
I think MODOK's day in the sun is pretty much too bright. We just need to dim him down a little bit. And then the last one I'm going to nominate, because I've been playing him a lot more recently, is Forge. And I think Forge right now at a 2/1, giving +2 to the next card you play, knowing that that next card can be anywhere on the battlefield, in total, it's a 2/3, right? And that's pretty on curve for a 2-drop. So there are 2 different ways I could rework this one. The OTA version of this would be to make this, one OTA version, I should say, would be making him just a straight up 2/2. Just give him his own value, that 1 extra power. Because to give +2 to a card on that curve specifically, on that curve, doesn't mix with a lot of the game. You know, you're not looking at Forge very often as being a later game play for +2 for those ramping mechanics, because Shuri exists. And if you're on turn 4, Forge is the backup play if you're trying to figure out your ramping capabilities. It's still +2 power, but I feel like he needs to feel a little better. You could also do that by changing him to being a 2/0 that gives +3 to the next card you play. So kind of like a Warlock-ish feel to him where he's completely dead, but if you are going to boost something, it's going to give you a heck of a lot by doing this. There's a couple of different ways, but I think that the numbers for Forge, with how ramping curves work in this game of looking to build power to then re-amplify that power, whether it's, you know, multiplication, destruction, whatever it is, I just don't think that there's enough coming from Forge with where he's sitting as a 2/1 who gives +2.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. And Forge has been on my list before. I think it's a 2/2 is where he needs to be. I would be slightly worried with +3 just because of cards like Brood, just because of because if you think about it now, you're +3ing on a Brood. So now you're putting 15 power on turn 3. I get it. You have to have both cards in your hand, but this now gets super easily slotted into the Surfer decks. This gets slotted into your Patriot decks, right? Because even doing it on Mr. Sinister, like there's a lot of cards that may get slightly too strong, getting that extra 1 more power, because that's extra 2 power, extra 3 power on turn 3. But I would agree. He's been on my list. He's one of those cards when you scroll down in the list and you go, all right, what cards need to be touched? What cards are not being played? What cards are not being touched? And Forge just continually hits that list of like, he's not terrible, but he doesn't get played. He's okay. And like, even back in like series 1 and 2, when you look at this card, you go, if I have to, right? I mean, like, even when Medusa wasn't changed, even when some of those cards were still where they were, you would pick them over Forge. and I think that kind of showcases the fact that a 2/1 just doesn't stand out. And I think a 2/2 puts him kind of in that, okay, he may be playable, and now I can potentially slot him into a couple of these decks. But yeah, I don't know. I don't.
Cerebro 2.
Yeah. I mean, like that's what I'm saying. Like, well, no, because now you're gonna plus. Well, yeah, I guess if you Cerebro right after him,
there you go.
Would be good. But yeah, I mean, like, yeah, I don't think it's any more pluses on him, because I think if you start adding power, then he has to go to a 3, and maybe that's fine too. Like if you go, okay, now he's a 3-drop and he gets +3, and maybe now in a Surfer deck you look at that and go, okay, maybe I'll play him in Surfer, and he has a home. I think that's the problem with Forge right now, is he doesn't have a home. And even by giving him 1 more power or whatever, like, you're either going to like make him too good or not. But right now his biggest problem is he has no home. And we got to find his home. So
it's why he's there. And I'm going to preface something too, because those are my choices. And I know people are listening to the podcast and going, Guest, how did you miss the obvious? So because it's a segue to your choices, I'll tell you why I didn't choose anything evolutionary.
No, I was hang on. I was going to say the same thing, and then you can jump on top of that real quick. So cool. One of my first choices, right, is the high evolutionary. And I get it exactly what you're about to say. And we'll get to that in 1 second.
Mind melding. We didn't plan it. We just know.
But I wanted to add it to the list because, yes, it does need to be addressed. It does need to be continued to be talked about. There are several cards in the high evolutionary archetype that need touches. Wasp being able to hit 2 cards needs a touch. The fact that she's a 0/1, technically a 0/3, which is one of the best like combos that you can do, especially with Lockjaw or whatever, where you're doing this multiple times. So now she's a 0/5 in most games, is broken. You know, we've got Hulk. Hulk is an issue. Hulk being able to be a 6/20 that you're just kind of holding on to with no downside, like Infinite has, right? Like he wins you matches. There's many times where just him in a lane wins you the match. You know, Cyclops, in a way, being able to hit 2 cards every single turn, it's a problem. And again, that's turn 4, 5, 6, depending on how you build your deck. Like, he ends up being a massive, massive card. You've got, you know, the thing being able to hit the same card 3 times, and that being what, a 4/9 in that case. Like,
yeah,
these cards all need tweaks, and I just want to put them in there. I know they will not get them. That's the thing. I know they will not get them in this next OTA, but I want to keep them on the radar, and I'll let you kind of say what you're going to say, because I know where you're at with it, but I definitely just still wanted to at least put one. I wasn't going to take all 3 or 4, or 6 or whatever into this list.
Yeah.
But I wanted to name the one. And I think currently, yes, Hulk is a huge problem, but I think the value in Wasp is getting crazier at this point.
I agree. I have another fix on that too, but yeah. I think when it comes to the evolved cards, the devs know this shit's broken. Okay. They know. they know. But they're also on holiday. So I wouldn't be surprised if there was, in, you know, the end of the month, I would be surprised if, like, the last week of July, all of a sudden 3 of those cards got hit all at once. I wouldn't be surprised, you know, because we all are pretty much in agreement as a community for the most part. Hulk, Wasp, and Thing are the 3 cards that all have basically the exact same change that needs to happen. But I want to preface it too by saying none of these cards need their base power or cost changed.
Correct.
None of them. It's exclusively the evolved mechanic. It's just a little too strong. Yeah. And if I had to target exclusively only one of them, I would 1000% agree with you that it's Wasp before Hulk, because that value of 0/3, especially in lockjaw variations, being able to reduce 2 power and then have it disappear and then turn into something else, it's just too much.
And then so, Jane to get her right back to do it again.
Exactly. It's too strong of a combo for that deck, for that combination. So I agree with you 100%. It needs addressing, but I didn't put it on mine because it's not going to happen yet.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see what they do with her, because, or with all these cards, because they kind of even said when it was called out, they said, you know, we're looking at it. We're trying to figure out the best way to address it. You know, we'll essentially look at it in July, which means I probably expect, you know, August to be when they start to touch these cards. It could be July. It could be one of those, like, you know, again, I agree with you. I think their OTA changes, I think they're very simple. Their Wasp targets 1 card. Their Hulk gets +1. And maybe the Thing is an actual patch because it's can only, you know, targeting 1 card rather than being able to target 3, or maybe it's just the 2. I don't know exactly his specific one. Same thing with Cyclops. I think Cyclops is a problem. There's just not a lot of people that run Cyclops, but when he's ran, he is a problem. So I think it's one of those things where, like, we don't know what they are, and the devs have said, like, hey, when we do look at them, it may be more of a patch. Like, they've even kind of said that it's not just an OTA change. It may be a patch in how they have to look at them. So, it could just be the way the abilities are layered. Maybe they're not layered in a sense that they can OTA change the number within the stuff. I don't know, but I just want to make sure it's still out there. People still have it on the radar because they need it. They need it.
It's on the radar. Strong. Nobody's radar is turned off about High Evolutionary.
Yeah.
Everybody's in the same agreement. Whether you've climbed with it or not, you're tired of it.
Yeah.
Let's be honest here.
I think the other thing around this is the devs in general, and when we bring all these cards, right? When we talk about all these cards, most of these cards we're talking about and we're looking at are ladder specific. So again, what I'm saying is your Punisher change is not going to affect Conquest. You know what I mean? It's going to affect a random ladder deck that you're probably playing or whatever. So when the devs are
that
looking
one,
at this
yeah,
currently,
I'll agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, and again, high evolutionary, this is a conquest issue. And so I think the problem is right now, the devs have only had to look at ladder stuff. And now they're having to figure out, okay, we have 2 modes. And if we tweak a card in one mode, what does that do in the other mode? Because one of the arguments or whatever that they've said is, if you look at ladder, high evolutionary is not a problem. But that's because if you look at ladder, you're looking at the full community. You're looking at people that are series 3, that are series 2. And when you're in some of those worlds, he's not being played as much. When you look at Conquest is a very, I would say, very small portion of the community. I don't think if you look at the average player that plays this game, you probably had at most, and we don't know numbers, so we're just throwing it out there, but I would say at most you're looking at 30 to 40% of the community tried Conquest last week. And if they did, of that, I bet you 60% of that number only did Proving Grounds, right? Like I think if you really look at like where that community is, and that number could be even way smaller than that, like overall, but you look at that and then you go, okay, do we tweak a card to fix that maybe affects it in ladder? And I think the answer is yes, because I think Conquest is your new shiny mode that you have to really focus on. Because if that doesn't work, and literally, like we saw last season, every other deck was either bounce or high evolutionary, you're going to have a mode nobody wants to play, because it's play this deck or that deck, or cross your fingers to the RNG gods that you don't see bounce every single game, right? You know what I mean? So it's so crazy. So anyway, I just want to throw that out too, because I know that that's another thing that the devs have to think about, and I know they're thinking about it, but it's just one of those to remind the community that when we complain about one mode or the other, they're having to look at the game as a whole when they make these tweaks and changes, because some of these cards, we bump up, we bump down, they're in different worlds. And high evolutionary specifically, why I'm bringing that up, why I'm not bringing up bounce currently. Next week, I may say different about some bounce cards, but this week, why I'm saying bounce is, I don't think bounce is as good on ladder. It's still great. It's still a good deck, but there's so much variation on ladder that I don't think bounce is too restrictive, because it has some answers right now in Conquest. But next week, we'll see. Next week, I may have a different opinion after I do Conquest. No, next month or whatever, after I've experienced Conquest. I haven't got there this season yet, so
you're gonna get some hate mail for that one.
I know. It is good. Bounce is a good deck. I love Bounce. I've played Bounce, but I have not tried Conquest this month. So with Phoenix Force coming in with some of that, I want to see what the meta looks like next week in Conquest after I hit Infinite and Ladder. So my next card, moving on from High Evolutionary, is Adam Warlock. And I think that this is one of those things where if Adam Warlock had 1 power, just make him a 2/1. I think he can find more play than he does currently. I think the problem is you're taking a turn on turn 2, and you have to be winning your lane already from turn 1. So yes, that can happen in decks, but the fact that I know turn 2, I can play him into an empty lane or whatever and potentially get 1 card off of him, I think I'm playing more. Right now, there's some uncertainty of, if I play him on 2, am I getting a card? Because as soon as he comes down, my opponent is going to try to not let me get cards. They're going to try to play into that lane and no longer let me get cards, like a Nebula, right? But I think right now, this whole thing of, I can't just put him in a lane and make them play into the lane or try to trick them into the lane, like, he's not getting me a card. So make him a 2/1. Let me maybe get a card that first turn he comes out, and then maybe I see him get a little bit more play.
At 2 power, I disagree. At 3 power, at 2 cost, I disagree. At 3 cost, I would be on board with that. And here's why. Card generation is probably the most protected thing by the devs right now. And we saw that from the Crystal announcement when they changed Crystal to being a 4/4 and giving both players a card. They are very hesitant to figuring out how to make Crystal different or better, and that's what they settled on.
Yep.
And knowing that Thanos is giving you 4 card generation, but also putting 6 cards in your deck, you know, that's a even trade-off because you only, out of all of the cards, 4 of the 6 stones draw cards, not all of them. So put it all together, 4 or 5. Either way, it's not all of them. The purple one doesn't. 5 of the 6. I realized after. But if you make Adam Warlock a 2/1, that's a almost guaranteed free draw on turn 2. And I think that that's too powerful. I think that becomes too meta. I think if you put him at 3 cost, knowing that now all 3 locations are revealed, and then you still have that chance to have an open lane or that chance to get that one card exclusively maybe on turn 3 and change the narrative of that control for turns 4 and 5 exclusively. I think that's a part of then keeping him balanced. But if you give him power, you can't do it at 2 cost. I think that's just unfair, too powerful.
I disagree. You have Cable, gives you a card. You have Maria Hill, gives you a card. I think he can be a 2/1 and give you a card. We have 2
Maria Hill gives you random, and Cable gives you technically a random too, probably a Chavez.
Yeah, but you still get. That's what I'm saying though. You still get a card draw. I get that you're getting one of your card draws, but the fact
that's the difference.
I don't think so. I mean, the stones. I get it. You're saying you're putting stones in your deck, and then you're getting to draw cards.
Yes, but they're still your cards.
Right. The stones are still your cards. Adam Warlock would be your cards. I think you can put him as a 2/1. I think if you put him as a 3 energy, I think now you're going to make Surfer too good. I think by putting him up to a 3 and now being able to boost him off of Surfer, I think makes him too good in your 3-drop slot. I think you
disagree
could still put
because
him in a
Rogue was not played. Rogue wasn't played as a 3/1. But people didn't put Rogue into Surfer decks.
Rogue does different. Rogue, you have to be going against an ongoing. I would 100%. If he's a 3-drop,
right,
a 3/1, a 3/2, whatever, he would instantly go in my Surfer deck. Because I'm playing him in lanes where I know I have Brood in there. I have Polaris. I have Maximus. I'm getting my card off of that. Whereas as a 2/1, I still feel like he's not going to be in every deck. I feel like it gives him the chance to at least get 1 card. Because I truly feel like right now with Adam Warlock, there are not a lot of decks where you actually get to draw a card with him. And that's the problem is he comes down behind a 1/1 or a 1/2. And then if you're lucky, they played in a different lane. But if he's with a Nebula, if he's with, some of these other cards, like he's not drawing a card because they're never going to let you draw a card with him. So,
right. I like him in that Surfer equation, though, to revisit that, because that's what Warlock needs, is he needs the ability to also then have some kind of presence afterwards. And you're trying to compete for that lane. Because, for example, if you want him to work in a Surfer deck, you'd have to play him with a lead, get that 1. Okay, you get that on that. Great, awesome. You want to maintain that lead in a Surfer deck, you're going to have to play into that lane repeatedly for the next 2 turns, or you're going to have to brood it and hope. And then eventually, turn 5, it's probably a dead draw anyway. So I think it actually fits very well in there. But if I had to play a 2/1, if I had to play a 2/1 Warlock, that would be in every single one of my decks, because it would just be unfair broken, where if it's in my hand, I got a 50-50 shot for the most part. That's too strong, though. That's my point. It's too strong. Yeah. Let's do it. Sure, I'm cool about it. But I just think you're off your damn rocker about it. I think that's way too broken.
No, I would say they need to make the change, see if he gets play, see what it looks like, and then they can adjust it after that. They can move him up to a 3.
I'll put out sponsored content saying everybody play Adam Warlock just to get him changed back again, then, because it's just going to be
fine. That'd be fine.
Ridiculous.
I would disagree. I think that the 2/1 makes him playable, and right now he's not playable at all. I haven't checked the Snap.fan stats of how many decks he's in right now, but I guarantee I'd never see him. The only time I ever saw him was in the Galactus decks, and that was because they were literally playing everything into one lane. That was the only reason Adam Warlock ever got play. And I agree. I think right now, if you want to see him get play, he's got to have some power coming down on the first turn. I think if you made him a 3, you wouldn't even need to do that, because you could still have power on turn 1 and 2 playing into the same lane. If he's a 3-drop, you could start drawing cards there, even without the power, which I think defeats the whole purpose of it. So I think he really needs 1 power.
Yeah, he is in, based on the Snap.fan stats, he's in approximately 1% of decks in the last seen in 1% of games, I should say, over the last 30 days.
Give him power. All right. So next up, Strong Guy. Strong Guy is one of those cards where they buffed his ability to some level, but he's still not getting play. I think he's so restrictive of having an empty hand. I think he needs 1 more base power. Now, if they need to shift his ongoing like they've done with other cards, where his ongoing's a little less and his base power is a little more, like we've seen with a lot of the Guardians that they did, I think they need to do something, because the problem is he has to be in a turn 6 MODOK deck, and that is the only, like pretty much the only deck that can guarantee him getting his bonus. And even with that, it means I can't play Chop. Like, I have to draw MODOK on. Like, I can't play Apocalypse. There's certain cards that just don't work with him in the discard sense. I can't play Swarm. I can't play Apocalypse. I can't play a lot of these cards that you want to play with this archetype. So I think he has to be slightly buffed. And again, you can take down his ongoing if you need to, but I think he needs a better base. A 4/4 value, which is what he's going to be 95% of the time, because you're going to get caught with a card in your hand. He needs that. And I want to play him. I remember playing him right when MODOK decks started, and we were trying to do some crazy stuff with him. And if you didn't play your huge finishers, then he worked. But then he became the huge finisher, and I just don't feel like his power is a huge finisher card, if that makes sense.
It does. I'm gonna throw because you're not the first creator this week, oddly enough, to talk about a Strong Guy adjustment. Drew Berry also put one out, specifically talking about him, and he nominated him at a 2/2, same ongoing.
Yeah.
So basically the discard friendly mojo in a way, which I could see that too. I'm going to take it one step further with you and say, because think about when you would want to play him, and then think about the lines in which you play him. What about a 1/1?
Getting him out early, and he's getting +6 as a 1/1. So now we're looking at a
1/7.
Yeah. So you're looking at like a Maul, and his downside is you have to have an empty hand.
Now couple that with the MODOK adjustment I said earlier of bringing him down to a 5/7.
Yeah. But I'm saying like he's equivalent to the 1/7 like a Maul. Maw's his downside is I can't play into that location, which is huge. This one is my downside of the card is my hand has to be empty. I have to literally play all my cards and or play MODOK on turn 6 without having Apocalypse or Swarm in my hand, right?
And it revives the zoo variation, because playing him down as a 1-drop, if he's a 1/1, sure, he can get the Khazar boost, he can get the Blue Marvel boost.
Yeah,
but you still have to get rid of everything.
I'm okay with that
because turn 6,
because
it could work.
Killmonger still destroys him.
Yeah,
you have an answer. You have an answer for this giant 1/7 down on the field. So I could see that. I could see him going down, whether it's a 1-drop or a 2-drop. I could see him going down, because I do think his restrictive of emptying your hand is a lot harder than people think. You can't play Chavez, right? Like, because you have to play MODOK on 6. Well, I guess you can play Chavez because you can just destroy her anyway on MODOK, but you have to have MODOK in your hand. So yeah, I would be okay with that. It would be interesting to see. And I think at a 1, it gives it to where the protection with having Electra with, and I know nobody plays her, but with having Electra, with having Killmonger, it allows you to have some protection against him. So I
big
I
upside.
Could see that. I could see that.
Very conditional to get it to happen. Can be done. Can be countered. You know, you could also remember you also still have your ongoing counters like Rogue.
Yeah.
To absorb it, as well as Enchantress, who's going to make a revival next week. Tell you right now, Enchantress and Rogue, y'all be ready for them. They're coming back. Surfer's going to make a big comeback next week. Tell you right now, get used to it. Play your Cosmos. Get ready for it.
It's already. Nina put out her deck that took her to Infinite, which was Surfer. I was playing it last night for just a little bit, and I ran into so many Surfer decks. And again, I don't know if that's matchmaking, but I literally didn't see any bounce decks last night. Not a single bounce deck last night. And it was either High Evolutionary or Surfer for some reason. So,
funny.
I would agree.
Funny you say bounce, because bounce is on my radar for actual card changes. I have a very specific change that I forget whose chat I was in, where I put down this specific change with Angela. And this is patch version change. This is not an OTA style change. This is not a numeric change that could happen on another week. We only get one of these a month. Who's going to be adjusted type changes. And I'm putting Angela on this list because I think if you change Angela's text from what it currently is, which is after you play a card here, give +2 power. If you change that to after the first time you play a card here, +2 power.
Meaning you can't.
I think that you can't kitty her. And I think that's the solve for Kitty Pryde, because right now Kitty Pryde is probably the most dominant card in the game, given its value, even with all of the evasion that it can do around Killmonger and friends. I think that right now, Angela having that reinforcement on top of it is probably the biggest issue of being able to keep up with bounce. And bounce is the most dominant deck in the game. I agree with my writer cohorts who have put out articles on Snap.fan over the last couple of days that, Toriken, was 100% right. Bradzifer, 100% right. Bounce is the top archetype right now overall in the entire game. And that means that something needs to be looked at. It needs to be tweaked.
I think the
tweak is Angela. Shoot.
I think there's a tweak they can make that makes bounce so counterable. And it's not tweaking the cards. What it is the priority. It is ridiculous that I can start my turn with priority, pick up Kitty, and now not have priority. I should keep my priority. And if that happens, Killmonger kills Kitty Pryde every game. The problem is because that priority shifts at the moment, and that's how they stay behind. That's how they make sure their kitty doesn't die. They can have a 13 power kitty coming down, and the thing is, because she comes back up to my hand before the actual turn starts, and now the priority goes back to you, you can't catch my kitty with a Killmonger. And I think if they make that one change, it makes it so much easier to catch a kitty with
it was like that. It was like that for like 24 hours. If you remember, with Kitty Pryde when she second time reintroduced into the game. Yeah. Priority used to stick, and then they determined that was a bug, and then they hot fixed it.
Yeah, they need to put that back, because that's the problem right now with bounce is they have so much control over not having priority so that they can do their beast stuff, so that they can do all of these little things that they want to do, and you don't have proper answers to how they're controlling it. And if they don't do that, I'm telling you, that's because playing bounce as much as I played last season, this season, especially in Conquest, if you couldn't control it as well as you could, then Shang-Chi, Killmonger, all these cards become answers prior to turn 6.
I would rather, instead of that, if you're going to touch Kitty at all, I would say hear me out. I think it's actually to make her a 1/1. Because you then have the ability to Shang-Chi her 1 turn early.
Maybe. I mean, I could potentially see that too. I know a lot of people are going to say you can't give her more power, right? But I could see that change.
Think about the increase in counter. Think about the increase in counter, which is part of the issue with Kitty Pryde. But that's why I'm looking at Angela, because I don't think right now, given that Kitty Pryde has been in the game, what, a month and a half, 2 months?
Yeah.
Roughly? When does she come back to everybody again?
She should have been another month on top of that, but yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah. But thinking about like how the game mechanic works, I can't defend the card not being on the battlefield, but the power is for priority. Well, because if you change how priority works,
the difference here is if she was picked up at the end of turn, then you would go into your turn not having that power. You pick her up at the start of turn. So at the start of turn, when board state is checked, you have more power on the board, and then she gets picked up, meaning we've already determined you have priority. That's the way I read this stuff of like, I know that once after we've determined you have priority, you no longer have the whatever, but we've already started our turn. At the start of turn, we determine who has the most power. You have the most power. You have priority. Now go to card state actions, right? We've already checked board state actions. Now we're going to card state actions, which says pick up this card. And we've already set that all in motion, which is where I think it was originally programmed. And I think is why it was right. And then they said, wait a minute, she's not on the board now, because I do think it could be slightly confusing to a new player to say, well, wait a minute, why do they still have priority when I have more power? But that's how they're taking advantage of the system with Beast on 5. They're picking up their Angela, that's massive. They're picking up their Kitty, they're picking up all these cards, and that's what makes it so hard.
I think there's one card that causes a problem. I think there's one card though that causes a problem with that. One card in particular, and that's Crossbones.
Yeah, and we're about to see Crossbones have an issue anyway with Jean Grey, but we'll get to that at some point where you may be winning a different lane and you can't play Crossbones over there because it has to go in the Jean Grey lane. But But I get you. I get what you're saying though. You're winning this lane. You've picked up your stuff, but it doesn't. It doesn't. The power doesn't stay there.
Because I did it.
I'm not. So here's the thing. I'm not saying your power stays there. I'm saying that your power still reverts. So game state action says we start turn. You had the most power on all the boards. It's your turn. Next level of this is pick up your cards, adjust the power in the locations because now she's been picked up. So now if you're not winning that location, you can't Crossbones, but you still have priority. I'm just talking specifically game state action checks priority, not anything else. But if we do that, it allows us to, you can beast all day long. And that's how they're getting around this on turn 6. You can beast all day long and pick everything up on turn 5. Turn 6, well, beast, never mind. Beast is different. You're already picking it up. You go to turn 6, you still don't. But I could have hit your kitty beforehand. Anyway.
You remember that time we were talking about Angela?
Yeah. So
cool.
So anyway,
I do too.
I'm just saying in overall, I don't think Angela is the problem. I think Angela's fine. You have to have Angela and you have to have Kitty in order to make her go crazy. And I don't know.
Right. And that's the only way you play that combo anyway, right now in a bounce deck, which is why it's so broken. You want bounce to be good. You don't want to kill bounce. I think if you do your Kitty change, I think you completely kill bounce, in my opinion. Because then it goes back to pre-Kitty days. And people are like, oh, yeah, bounce is cool. We could do Bishop and Mysterio and Angela. And all right, cool. That's great. Awesome. But once you added Kitty and the ramping that came from Kitty, especially with Kitty and Angela, that's when you ended up like, oh, damn, this is just all too good. Yeah. That's where I see the issue. So that's why I say touch Angela first. Don't kill the messenger. But at the same time, yes, kill the messenger. Kill Angela first, then do this, because it only affects really this one combo. That's how I'm looking at it. There's not too many other cards that are going to be like
your beast
super taking advantage of this.
Your beast is what gets awkward with it, because a lot of the times. But
no, it doesn't proc on beast. It doesn't proc on beast. She doesn't get +2 with beast.
What I'm saying is you pick her all up. So usually in this combo, it's Angela, Kitty, whatever, and then you beast it all back. And then now when you play Angela the second time, you're going to have to be, okay, well, I can't throw Kitty into it. I can't throw this card into it. I got to throw this other.
Thank you. That's the fucking point.
I don't like it. It's too complicated. Too complicated to a normal user to know that, okay, when I pick Angela
it's
up,
complicated enough to a
cards.
caffeinated user, good sir.
No. Again,
you can do this.
You want to fix bounce, fix priority. That's all you need.
Next up, before I smack you through the screen, all right? Next up, this is not my take. I saw this on Twitter. I forget who said it. Somebody said it on Reddit also, and I 100% agree. Bring back old Aero.
I agree.
Because the reason she was changed was Death Wave. And that shit died. And high Evo's a problem.
Yeah.
And putting Aero back to her original mechanic, for those who don't remember, which was to move all enemy cards played this turn to this location, becomes a huge high evolutionary counter. And enough to
bounce
keep
too.
That. Yeah, counter to bounce, counter to high evolutionary, all in one card. I think that old, even at 5/8, I can leave it at that. You don't have to bring it back to the 5/7. Like, just even at 5/8, 5/7, either way, that specific mechanic helps with the control meta. And I think bringing her back, considering that she died for the sins of Deathwave, and Deathwave is now dead, she's now just dead. So let's bring back old Aero, because I think that makes total sense.
I agree. And when I say counter to bounce, I don't mean turn 6 bounce. I mean turn 5 bounce. Turn 6 bounce, they're filling up all their slots anyway. Turn 5 bounce, you're going to move that beast. You're going to move that card that they're trying to pull back, and they're going to pull back a different lane. So I agree with you. I think right now Aero is one of those cards where, because it's the last card, which sounded great, but it's not. Because if you look at any of the Shuri whatever decks, they're playing 2 cards. If you look at the high Evo decks, like you said, they're playing Wasp and Hulk. And if they're smart, they're playing them in that, they're playing Hulk and then Wasp. So you're pulling a Wasp, so it doesn't matter. So I would agree with you. I think it needs to pull all the cards, not just the one. I think that this truly killed Aero. I mean, yes, Aero popped up every now and then, but she's not playable in most, I would say in 95% of decks. She's not playable anymore. And it needs to go back to that. I don't think, outside of Deathwave, I don't think she was ever a problem. And the only reason she was a problem with Deathwave was because you had the free death on turn 6. And you just said, literally, don't care what you're playing. It's all going to this lane. And I think that needs to come back, because the way the meta is today, the way the style the decks are today, it's not going to be overpowered. It's just going to be an answer. So I'd agree with you. Yeah.
Bring back old Aero, please. Second dinner. We'd love to see the re-rise of Aero. Last one is in honor of my friend Bude, because he's pushed for this for a while. And the more and more I sat on it and looking at the cards that have come on in recently, I think that it's relevant, and it's Kingpin. I think Kingpin needs to be changed so he's not just moves here on turn 6. I think he needs to be available as just whenever cards move here, straight up Fisk Tower that shit. But in exchange, I say move him to being a 4/6, so that way you're not having it eligible with perfect curve of, Kingpin on 3, Stegron on 4, new Aero on 5. It's just, and then everything's dead. No. You got to make him a 4 cost. So I say make him a 4/6, which is on par with Spider-Man 2099. It's their new favorite stat line, 4/6. So keep it consistent. Make him a 4/6. When a card moves here, destroy it.
I don't know if you can give them any more power, because you're removing power on their side. But I would agree with you. It needs to be more than the one turn because it's too predictable currently. Like the only way it can be non-predictable is, all right, I'm going to play him on 6 and I'm going to play Polaris, which is going to grab a 1 or 2 drop, right? Like there's not much that you can do. The other thing is if you limbo, he doesn't do anything on turn 7. So he's so narrow in what he does.
Yeah.
And he's so visible. And again, maybe with these weird move decks or with, you know, the Phoenix Force decks, right? Like right now, maybe he could be a semi-answer when you put him in one lane, but it's not enough. Like I'd rather just Professor X the middle lane than mess with this when it comes to move. So I would agree with you. I think he needs to be able to do multiple turns. I think a 4-drop is probably fine. I do worry, like you mentioned, if we revert Aero, that combo is going to be very strong. So being able to 5 or 6, literally just say, I don't care what you just did, I'm destroying everything you just did, is a little tricky. And maybe that was the reason why originally when Kingpin was released, it was 6 because Aero, you know, and being able to kind of use that combo. So I that would be my only concern, would be if we reverted Aero and you had Kingpin be every turn. But I do agree with you. Kingpin right now feels too weak. It needs to be every turn, which means maybe even he's, I don't want to say a 5-drop because then I don't feel like you have much time to set up for him. But but I don't know. And again, maybe he's a 5-6 if Aero gets reverted.
Yeah.
If Aero doesn't get reverted, I love a 4-drop.
The other variation on it is to keep him at its exact 3 and 4 cost, but change the mechanic to say when a card moves here on turn 5 or later.
Or the first card moved here. I think you could do that. I think you could do the first card moved here. Yes, Stagron's still going to
turn.
Yeah, I think if you did that, it makes it fair enough to where if they're Heimdalling, it's only killing the first card. If you revert Aero, it's killing the first card moved. So I think you could do that. Yeah, I think you could do that. Revert your Aero, but make it every turn, and maybe that makes it.
I could see that
feel as good.
I'm cool with that. If it's even if it's at a 3-drop, at a, you know, and it says each turn, the first card that moves here. That, which I think could actually be a lot of fun thinking about it secondarily too, because then you could throw priority.
No.
You know, get a ghost mechanic going on. Like there's a lot that you could do with that. So I think he's overall, like people wanted him to be good. We wanted to make Kingpin work in so many decks, and it just, every time it's like, no. But what about you?
All right, so no, we're not gonna do that. Going into mine, I'm gonna start with the card we've already named a little bit earlier, if I can find her, Crystal. Crystal needs to be touched yet again because the touch that they did was terrible. The fact that now she's a 4/4 and they get a card is not a good thing. Why would I ever play this over White Queen? I love the whole redraw your hand mechanic. I love that mechanic that she had. I just really felt like she needed to be able to be played anywhere to redraw your hand. There is pros and cons of redrawing your hand. You may get trash. You may have to throw away one of those good cards in your hand to try to get something better. So I really did love her original like mechanic and how she worked. I do not like this 4/4. Why am I ever going to play something at a bad curve and give you a card? Yes, I get a card, but you just got the card that probably wins you the game that I just gave you. So I think she just needs to be fully re-looked at. Maybe bring her old mechanic back, but make her be able to do it anywhere. Maybe look at this and go, hey, she needs to be a 4/8. That's huge, but I don't know what it is. But like, to give you a card is not a good look just for me to give one card. And I don't think it needs to be some weird, like I get 2 cards and you get 1 card. That's just too weird. But I don't know.
Well, I think of Maximus. Who I've called for being nerfed, you know, as well previously. But, you know, Maximus, it's looked at as a penalty, but card draw is a reward. So you look at the card draw cards, like, you know, as we just talked about with Adam Warlock, they're going to say, look, that's probably the most valuable thing in the game when it comes to different mechanics is getting one of your cards, not getting a card, getting one of your cards that you specifically built into this deck is one of the most powerful things you can do in the game. So the fact that she gives you a draw without having to sacrifice your current hand and your current plan, I like that mechanic from her. And I don't think you need to make her stronger because then it becomes even more broken. You said 4/8.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying, like, I don't know what her changes. I really think she needs to be reworked. I would much rather get your 6-drop in my hand at a 4/6, aka White Queen, than to play this 4/4 and give you something you potentially need. Because you're also built your deck around every card that you want in your deck. And so for me to play something that's under curve, 4/4 is way under curve for what 4s do. Darkhawk, White Queen, Rock Slide, like all these cards are 1,000 times better than Crystal. And so to get one extra card out of my deck at a 4/4 is just, to give you a card is not good. So like, again, go back to the stones, right? The stones are 1-drop draw card. Go back to any of the other things. Like, this is just one of those cards where it needs to be relooked at. It needs to be reworked, because even giving her power, so even making her a 4/8, and I'm not saying that's what they need to do. I'm just saying, even making her that, I don't think it's worth giving you the potential card that you are waiting for, giving you the Phoenix Force that you didn't have in your hand, giving you that giant Hulk, you know, from High Evolutionary, giving you Galactus, whatever it may be in your deck, potentially giving you your finisher card, while I may get my 1-drop that I don't need anymore, right? And it be a 4/4 curve.
I think I have a solve then. That makes sense. If you want to try to go down that route, you don't want the opponent to get a card too, fine. How about this? 4/2. If you are losing the lane you play this card into, draw a card.
No, still don't play her. The curve's too bad. I keep going back to, it's a 4-drop. If I'm going to look at any other 4-drop, any kind of card draw, I'm going to go White Queen over this card. Because White Queen gives me a 6-drop. This is where I beat your head in with a hammer, because your mindset on card draw is completely different than the rest of the community who are looking at card draws. You are stuck in the mindset of Devil Dino, where give me a card because I want to beef up my hand with anything. No.
Don't care what it is. No, it is though. Hold on. Wait, stop. No, I'm mad now. Listen, it is. Yes, because you'd rather take a Maria Hill and a White Queen and a random card draw than you would focusing on a sacrifice to figure out how to get the specific card that you went into the battle with. And those are two completely different mindsets, good sir. If you're looking at your specific card draw and getting the cards that you built, the 12 fuckers that you put into a deck, you have to try to figure out, what is it going to take for me to get those cards into my hand, and what value does that bring? Randomness, because you don't know what your opponent is playing, right? It's just like the randomness of Spider-Ham, who's his own big issue at this point. Like, the randomness of, you don't know what their highest cost card is. Yes, you're getting information, but it's going into your hand. Just like Nick Fury, balanced enough because it's all random. Maria Hill, all of them, they're all completely random. So when you're putting those cards into your hand, if you're looking for randomness because you want to keep your opponent maybe off guard, sure, have fun with that and put in a Devil Dino combo. But if you're trying on the specific strategy of what Crystal was meant to do, which is to give you your cards, that's what the shuffle mechanic was for, and that's what this version of the mechanic is for, is about getting your cards into your hand in some way, shape, or form, but it has to be balanced enough. So they try to figure out, how does it happen for both sides?
Yeah, and
I don't think that there's a way to make it work, though. Because you're in a whole nother mindset.
She needs to go back to what she was in her mechanic, and her mechanic should be able to be played on any location. I think right now what they did with her is they ruined a card. They made her unplayable. Because right now, again, going back to your statement that if card draw is the most powerful, card draw from your deck is the most powerful thing you can do, having a card that allows them to also draw a card now makes it to be, I don't want to do the most powerful thing for you. I think when you look at her right now, White Queen does something different. White Queen is not a random card. It is their top card. It is their predictability of what are they doing on turn 6. It's a 4/6, so it's above curve, and it gives you the possibility that maybe you don't have a turn 6. You just got their giant Hulk. You just got their Magneto. So now I know exactly how to play around their Magneto. I've got a Magneto of my own that I can play to move their Darkhawk, whatever they've done. So I think what you do with Crystal is you revert her back to what she did, which is discard your hand and draw new cards. And it is, you can do this anywhere. I think the problem she had originally that nobody played her was the fact that she had to go in the center lane. I think the issue with Quake is she has to go in the center lane. I don't understand why there is a restriction on the location. Like I can somewhat get it for Medusa in the fact, and again, if you look at Crystal, Medusa, they're all in Quake, they're all in humans, and humans have to, for some reason, look at the middle lane. I don't know why, but they did. And I think that that is the flaw that was in her design, is she did not need to be in the middle lane because it pigeonholes you into what you have to do. And there's games where you cannot use the middle lane. And I think that that is the problem with any card that says has to be in this particular lane, because sometimes you can't play in that lane. And I think the Inhumans are the only ones. And
do you have a problem with Giganto?
I guess Giganto has the left lane, but and again, I get it. Giganto is a 6/14. It's a gigantic swing on a lane. It's the restriction,
powerful ass effect.
But discarding your hand and drawing new cards and the randomization of what you could draw and the risk of I have to get rid of what's in my hand, because 90% of the time there's a card in your hand you want 90% of the time. And so for her effect to be able to be played anywhere, I do not think is too powerful. So I think they need to revert her. They need to revert her back to where she was and remove the lane restriction, and she'd be fine. So I don't like
live with that. Yeah, I do like the new effect because I look at it in the same mindset as when Nexus is on the board, right? What is your strategy?
Nexus on the board. If I can
Nexus
change
on the
it,
board.
If I can change it, I change it, depending on what deck I'm going against. And then if it's on the board, you want to make sure you have the bigger cards there. But I mean, again,
right,
giving them a
immediate
card,
potentially
giving their best card is a problem.
Right. But playing into the best location is the same type of mindset, in my opinion, where, look, if you know Nexus is on the board, you should be competing for Nexus. If you have a location control, you're going to play your location control as you're out of that because you're trying to manipulate the board. But 80-something% of the time, I feel like Nexus is on the board. It's just a straight up muscle match. How can I beef up the Nexus higher than you?
Right, but
you're compete naming, for Nexus exclusively.
You're naming one
power
location, right? You're naming.
I'm talking about the mindset. I'm not talking about that being a specific comparison. I'm saying the mindset of this is the powerful thing. Do the powerful thing. Your opponent is doing the same exact powerful thing. Both of you have equal opportunity in that instance. It's an even mindset. So that's where I think, like, I wouldn't mind old Crystal, like your version of old Crystal, of switching her to a, old mechanic, but that could be played anywhere.
Yeah.
If so, though, be ready for that thematic consistency to also happen to Medusa, to change her back to a +2 that could be played anywhere.
I'm fine with that. I think Quake also needs to be changed. So if
I do too, but that's a sidebar.
Quake, right. Yeah. I mean, I'm just saying, like, I think if you're going to do it, I think you just get rid of some of those restrictions. I'm fine with Medusa being played anywhere. You change your back, do whatever. But like, I really think Crystal needs to go back because this change did nothing. Go look. She literally doesn't get played. I think we saw her in one deck on Wednesday Night Snap or J-Hugs or somebody was just trying to do something different because they wanted to make sure they got their card. But again, I
got it to work.
Huh? So I don't know.
Yeah, I'll show you. I'll show you at the end of the podcast.
All right.
But
so,
who else you got, good sir?
Next card. Or is the last card? This is the next card. Next card. Yeah, we got so many. Speaking of reverting cards, so you've talked about Aero. We've talked about Crystal reverting. Magik. I always did not like the change that they did to Magik, where she can only be played on turn 5. Change her back. Change her back. She needs to be played on turn 6. Oh. I get it. There was a lot of people that were got by this card, where turn 6 you thought you were playing your best thing, and then you changed it. But if you want to get rid of bounce, if you want to get rid of what people thought they were doing, bring her back. I don't think that there was not a problem with her doing this. There was just too many people complaining that I played my best cards on 6 and all of a sudden there's a turn 7. There's so many games where she gets in your hand and on 5 you have 2 choices to make and you can't pick Magik. So do it, man.
I was not expecting that.
Go back. Revert her back.
This might be the podcast that gives us the most negative comments. I swear to God.
I don't care.
I know. I know.
There's so many games where
I'm trying to weigh the options though. Like,
what?
Yeah, and I see what you're saying though.
Like you look at high.
It's not a matter of
all these decks, and all these decks have these gigantic turn 6 plays. So now you add a mechanic that they have to respect. That you may make a turn 7, and now that Hulk that you just threw down in high Evo can get Shang-Chi'd. You just turned around and you just made that bounce deck where you literally picked everything up on turn 5 and you played everything on turn 6. I just gave you a turn 7, and I have 1 turn to look back and see what I can do. You know, you've got a Galactus deck that literally just blew everything up on turn 5, and they're trying to play null, right? Like Spider-Man on turn 4, whatever they're doing, right? They Galactus on 5, they Spider-Man on, you know, the next turn, whatever it is, right? And you're like, boom, there's 1 more turn. Now what are you gonna do? So I think it adds more complexity back to the system. I feel like it was never, again, yeah, you got, but you still had another turn to do something. And I think with the way the meta is, this makes bounce have to respect that there may be 1 more turn instead of dumping their hand.
Well, in ladder versus tournament and conquest, I think that's where I struggle in difference, because on ladder, people are going to absolutely hate it. In tournament and conquest, 100% makes sense. And I guess that's where I'm torn, because I'm sitting here thinking of like the meta decks, and I'm thinking about, you know, the turn 6 play and versus the turn 5 play, you know, the volley and serve. And on ladder, where, as you said earlier, more of the community is more active. If you put Magik back to that mechanic, people will riot. But you are, in my opinion, correct on the conquest and tournament scene, where the respect of Magik over the course of the entire game, like the course of the entire match, I think that now it really does become a threat, because you have multiple exposures to understanding that that's there of, should I play big, or do I think that they're actually going to use their Magik? Do I think they have their Magik? Am I counting the right amount of cards that are down and in their hand? What are their chances of having it, not having it? Like, in that instance, I agree. In ladder, I think that it'll become too frustrating of a mechanic where people will just like push away from it, and ladder is the bigger appeal right now for the game. Because I mean, you talked about the balance of the 2 different game modes right now. They have to think about both. And I think that in Conquest and in tournaments in the higher competitive scene, that is a solution for those bigger decks. But I think it comes at the cost of Magik.
All right. So going off of ladder compared to tournament, I can see the argument, but at the same time, it's one of those things where it can be frustrating, but at the same time, I think it helps with the current meta of ladder, with what you're doing there. And worst case, man, if they get you, they get you. I feel like Galactus is the same thing. Galactus is still the same thing where I've built all this stuff up and Galactus just blew up the board, right? I've built into lane 1 and 3. Galactus gets played on lane 2. I wasn't expecting it or whatever, and bam, I lose because of it. So I see it kind of as that mechanic. Yes, it's not going to feel good every single game, but at the same time, I just feel like her playability went away. Again, I would make that same argument if you look at Snap.fan and things like that. She does get played in a few decks, but it's very, very specific decks that she gets played in now. Whereas if you looked back, I know we don't have stats on this, but if you looked back way before her change, she got played in a lot of decks. Not every deck, but she got played in a lot of decks to give you that extra turn, on that turn 6. And I don't think it, I think it was just people not being used to Snap complaining about it. But then if you revert her back, people start to understand and remember, and then it's something you just have to kind of think about, as you're going through, that Magik's a card and Magik could extend this game. And in most decks, I think that's going to be fine. I think your complainers are going to be bounce. Your complainers are going to be the people that fill up the board on turn 6, and then they don't have a place to play anything. And I think that that's just a mechanic within there. So I could see the complaint coming from ladder of, hey, I thought this was my last turn, but I don't think it warrants it big enough to not make the change. Will they make the change? Probably not. But I do think if we're talking about reverts, we're talking about Aero dying for the certain sins of Death Wave. We talk about Crystal still not being played because of, the change they made there. I think Magik's another one of those that she got changed because so many people just didn't understand her mechanic. And again, this was changed before Galactus, right? Like before Galactus was released, she got changed. And then you got Galactus, and everybody complained that Galactus practically did something similar in the fact that you thought this was going to happen and now it didn't. And I think that Magik would be fine if you went back. Yes, you're going to have some complainers, but I think it needs to happen to help the big turn 6 over the top plays, which we are back to in this game with Surfer. Imagine a Surfer deck, right? You set up your turn 6 for Surfer. You got all this going on, and all of a sudden I go, here's Magik. Oh yeah, by the way, turn 7, here's Shadow King. Here's Shang-Chi. Yeah. Here's these cards where I just literally take away 2 of your lanes because you didn't think about that being an option. So I don't know.
Gonna have to call that the undo deck.
Yeah.
Magik on 6, and then just like Shadow King Shang-Chi and
Kang on 6
and Kang and oh my god
into Magik to be like, oh, I saw.
No, it's Magik. It's Magik on 6, Kang on 7.
Well, no, at
Retreat on 7.5.
You've already filled all this up. It's Kang on 6 just to make sure they're filling up the board, and then they're like, okay, did they retreat now? No, they didn't.
If it's bounce, okay. Yeah. If it's bounce, yeah. If it's not bounce, oh my god, people will. You're gonna give them an 8-turn game by putting Magik and Kang together on ladder. I'm telling you right now, the devs already hate you.
Yeah.
Listen. What do you have against Jeremy Renner?
All right, so Jeremy Renner. Oh man, so we've talked about the 2 reverts, right? The 2 reverts that I want to do. Looking through the cards, like honestly, you name some cards. I agree and I disagree, right? In some of the different aspects, I've named some cards you've disagreed, but here's the thing: when I really truly look through everything in the game, I don't really think there's one particular card that's like, oh, this needs to be totally, changed, broken or not broken or whatever. But I always kind of fall back to like some of these cards that we just don't use. You had Punisher as one of yours, but here's the thing. I used Punisher in Series 1 and 2, right? Series 3, nah, he's out of there. But Series 1 and 2 I used. Hawkeye, I've never used. Hawkeye is one of those cards where like, I get it for Series 1. You play him, you play something into him. Now he's a 1/3. But no, like Forge is better than this card in almost every single sense. So I just think something needs to happen to Hawkeye. I get that he's a Series 1 vanilla, whatever card. So you got to be careful with what you do with him. But he doesn't do enough. He either needs to be a 1/2 and you get +1 or 1/2 and +2. I don't know. Maybe then he's playable. But right now in the 1-drop, he's not playable.
I'll give you a fun anecdote. So about Hawkeye specifically. So just this past week, my son, who's 8 years old, finally said, I want to learn Marvel Snap.Dan. I was like, okay, sure. So downloaded it for him, showed him the tutorial, roughly get him started. I can't come to break his little heart on explaining how bots work, but he's doing really well. And he's loving it. He's absolutely loving the game.
Yeah.
First time he has the ability to build a deck and start tweaking cards the way he wants.
Yeah.
The first card he decided to get rid of was Hawkeye.
Yeah.
And that is my reason for agreeing with you. Because if an 8-year-old knows this card doesn't do enough for you, it needs some love.
Yeah. It's bad. And again, maybe if it's not, I don't know. If it's not Hawkeye that gets touched, maybe it's a Kate Bishop card that comes in. I don't know. That's better. But like, I feel like when I scroll through the entire list of cards, and this is what we were talking about before, right? When we were looking at OTAs, you're looking at redos, like there's not a lot of cards in here that you can't think of like, oh, well, I've seen that in that deck. Well, I've seen that in this deck. But like literally outside of a Series 1, when you're forced to use them, like I don't ever see this card. Unless Shanna gives it to you.
And you're right.
So, or like X-Mansion or something puts it there. Like so I definitely think he just needs something. And again, maybe it's just being a 1/2. Maybe it's an OTA change, but realistically, like I think he needs some kind of overhaul. I understand he's a vanilla Series 1 card, so you have to be very careful with an overhaul on him. But he's definitely just that card where he's just not good. Not good at all.
If they could do it to Medusa, they can do it to him.
Yeah. So
Medusa is literally one of the first cards you grab in the game. So she finally got the love that she deserves too.
Yeah. So that's my third card. Again,
I'm with you.
If he doesn't get touched, it's not going to be the end of the world. That's where I end up with this particular card. I think you're going to get more impact on those other two cards unless they just truly overhaul this card. And then all of a sudden we're like, oh man, Hawkeye's really good. Let's bring him back. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe here's an idea. Because we're not talking about OTA changes. We're not talking about just like +1 overhauls here. Maybe he is a card we can start creating a partner synergy with. So if you have X on the field, this card gets blah. So if you think of like Hawkeye, release a Kate Bishop card and Hawkeye and Kate Bishop, Hawkeye and Black Widow, Hawkeye, you know what I mean? Like start to kind of build this. Maybe, that's a potential with them, in the future. But I don't know. Because again, I know a lot of people have said like they need faction-based stuff in here, like X-Men get this and that. They've definitely said like Inhumans look like this, Guardians of the Galaxy look like this. But like maybe this is where we can dabble with it. We can start to build the partner cards, and then from the partner cards, we can get a faction-based card. So.
Yeah, even if it's just make it even simpler. Just say Avengers, and have it be the core crew of Avengers. Hawkeye keeps his current mechanic. If 2 other Avengers are on the field, another +2. Something like that. Like that would work. I'd be cool with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Something along those lines. Like I like that idea. But either way, we're both in agreement. Hawkeye needs something, man. He needs something. Yeah. But outside of the cards, just to kind of touch on it real quick before the deck of the week, there's just a couple of things I wanted to shout out as things that we need in the game still. They're not card related. They're still things that can drop with a patch. And one of them just doesn't matter. First off, we still need this mute all button. They've talked about it previously. Yep. The ability to, in your settings, disable all emotes. And let me add on to that, emotes plus the chat things of like, hello, arg, you know, all of that crap, like all of it, full disable, because there are still reasons to want to use that option. I would love to do that.
Can they just put a timer on them? So here's the thing. I get that everybody says this, and I get that now it's actually worse than Conquest, because if you find that toxic person, it's literally every round that they're doing it. It's not just the one. But like, to me, the only time I ever see it is when you've snapped or whatever, and then all of a sudden the end of the game, they have the better play, right, or whatever, and then they're like snap, 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 like thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up, or you know, you've blown them out, and then they're like super salty, and they're doing whatever they're doing. To me, it happens like once every 50 games, so it doesn't happen that often. But I'm curious, what if there was just like a cooldown timer, or is it still just as annoying? They just wait every 5 seconds to do it.
You'll never get Ben Brode to agree with it, because his opening routine every single time is hello, fist bump. And you have to do them consecutively, and you have to do them in the beginning of the match. And if that's what the boss does, you will not be able to take that away from him. Yeah. And I blame Banks because of that, because that's how we learned. But I wouldn't mind, you know, after turn 5, a restriction on emotes, you know, like one per turn, just a fist bump, or just a hello, just a snap, just a question mark, just whatever. Fine. One, cool. You want to be that guy and just use one of them? I could live with one. But as we say on our stream, don't be a fucknut, you know, because that's just, spammers need other things to do. Yeah. Second thing that I would like to see that is a non-card change come on in. Where's our roadmap? Like, we were supposed to originally, when they announced this, like, they said it was going to be every other month roughly. And it's been, what, February was the last roadmap?
Was there one in March?
March?
But it's
either way, it's been 3 months.
I mean,
it's been a hot minute.
I mean, I think they're realistically, right, that, I mean, I'll be transparent, right? One of the things is they've been working on Conquest, and they want to get Conquest out. So there wasn't too much to kind of, you know, go off of. But I would say the other side of it, if I had to guess, there's been things that have come off that roadmap. So we know this specifically because it's been asked about the sandbox mode, and they pretty much said like that's not on our roadmap anymore, but it was on the roadmap. And it was also like, it was on one of the roadmaps, then the next roadmap, it was off the roadmap. And then a lot of people were questioning it. So I have a feeling, just like we see with a lot of games, they kind of, I wouldn't say shot themselves in the foot, but it gets harder when they say it was on it. Even if it was in the very far right column that said like, hey, we would like to look at this at some point. People are like, well, what's on your roadmap, right? Yeah. Like, so I don't know. If I had to guess, we'll start to see things that are more of, hey, this is our roadmap, but it's literally next month, right? It's things that they pretty much got them done soon, and they had to get through Conquest. They had to get through their vacations at this point. But the other side, and I'll just throw it out there for roadmap, is when Snap was released, it was stated on several websites based on interviews and things like that, they had X months, and it was like 8 months or 10 months or something like that of content already built, and they were ready to release it and all of that. And just like with every game, I think we're getting to that point of all of that backlog that they had is already done, right? Like, they've already got these cards. Like, we're getting data mines for 2 months into the future of cards that are coming out and bundles and all of that. So they have all of that. And I think right now, if I had to guess, they're probably going, what's our next game mode we need to really be looking at? Because I think Proving Grounds is the sandbox we asked for, well, even though it's not 100%. Specifically I think battle mode, friendly battle mode, is our sandbox that we've asked for. And now it's like, is it draft? And again, in one of the interviews they had just the other day, I can't remember who Ben Broden, one of the other guys, was talking to, but that interview, they even said, like, they know draft is a thing that people want. They know that some type of sealed limited format is what they want, and they're playing around with the ideas. They have not started coding anything. They don't know what's coming, but they've started to kind of throw those ideas around. So, like, I would agree with you. We need the roadmap.
Well, let's not put all that information out there yet, though. Hold on, because they did also state, Ben did also state that Glenn promotes the idea of other resources specifically to build and use and create those style of things that it might not be something that works in the game specifically.
Right.
So it's something that they know people have requested, but it's not something that they've started or plan on starting anytime soon.
Well, it was, so in this interview is one of their devs, and I will find the interview, but it was one of the interviews with Ben Broden, one of the lead devs. I don't think it was Glenn. But they said that they've started talking through it and trying to see what's kind of there. Again, not programmed anything or have it on a roadmap or anything like that, but they have acknowledged those kind of things. And to your point, as of now, Glenn and some of these guys are saying, like, hey, there's some resources out there to mess with it. There's some websites out there that you can draft, you can, do a sealed pool and things like that. But I mean, it'll happen at some point. We just don't know when, and that's kind of going back to the roadmap. That's where a roadmap would be nice to say, like, is it officially on their path and trajectory
radar,
right? Like right now we've had them say, hey, that's interesting. That's something that we've heard the community say. It's something that, because a lot of these guys come from Hearthstone. Well, I mean, we know Ben Broden and them come from Hearthstone, but like some of these people come from Hearthstone, Pokemon, Magik, like all these different card games. And with all these other card games being released, I mean, we had the Harry Potter one that just released. We got DC Dual Force coming up. We've got, the old school ones that are still there doing, updates like Runeterra and some of those doing updates to their mechanics. I'm sure they're watching them going, okay, what's the number one play styles in these games? And is it something that makes sense to Snap? Again, I think Conquest was the toe into the water of how long can we keep people's attention? Because a draft, if done correctly, is hours. A sealed match, could be. Because like if I look at again, I know you hate me saying, but if I look at Magik, if I look at the way drafts work in Magic Online, if I look at the way those work, is you can either do it two ways. One, it's a pot of 8. You're only playing the pot of 8, or they have other tournaments over there where you draft and your draft is open for 48 hours, and you literally can play for 48 hours whenever you want, come in and come out. But you're going against other people that have drafted, but they're not in your same pod. They could have drafted anything. There's two different ways to do that type of thing. And I'm sure they're kind of looking at those going, okay, we've got Conquest. We've seen that people will sit down and play for X hours. We know it's this portion of the community that will do that. Is it worth our time or resources? Which goes back to that roadmap. It'd be nice to know what's in their minds right now, because like you said, the last one we saw, most of that's been checked off. Most of that's come to the game. A lot of it's come to the game. Even things that we maybe like but don't care about, like the having a card back for each deck and having a different, avatar for each deck.
Yeah.
Sure, it's there. Did I want it? Would I have rather them use that to let me just change the card borders for whatever color I want? Yes, I would have much rather had that in the time. But
this is true.
I don't know. I would agree with you on the roadmap.
Last thing on that list for me would have been the Conquest shop.
Yeah.
When you're going to make changes to the Conquest shop off of its premiere season, because of the amount of weeks that are in the entire season, and you don't tell people and you just do it, That's a little annoying, to say the absolute minimum, to see the increased cost of so many resources that people are looking to, grind and obtain.
So I expected this. I expected this in the fact that, like, literally it was super simple to get this exclusive card last season. It was super simple to get anything you wanted to get in the shop. I would layer on top of your transparency with Conquest and the fact that Proving Grounds gives less medals this season, and I don't feel like that was shared either until it was out.
Correct.
The other ones, silver, gold, infinite, like, you get more. So now which I think is the right play, but the communication was the issue. I think the issue was we all looked at it and said, "Oh, I can win 50 Proving Grounds and get this exclusive card and all the stuff in the shop." I don't think is the route that this mode should go, because then it just incentivizes what people are doing, which is go to Proving Grounds, both players just snap on turn 1, and then, bounce out if you didn't win the first game. So I'm glad that they did those changes. Again, maybe I'll get even more comments down below on the video, or comments, from the podcast on Twitter or things like that. But it's one of those things where, like, I like the changes, but I agree with you. Should have had some better communication, because that was the problem with this. A lot of changes happened here, and they were just kind of, missed. And maybe that was because of vacations. Maybe they just forgot to let the community know. But some people are going to get in here and get disappointed when they're like, wait a minute, that was 100, medals last time, and now it's going to take me 200, Proving Ground wins to be able to do what I did last time.
Yeah. It was a PR miss, in my opinion. I don't mind that they did it. I mind that we all found out the hard way, including the creator community, to talk selfishly, because we get a lot of that communication out to a lot more people than just the one location sometimes from the dev team. We put out, as creators, put out the YouTube videos, talk about it when it drops live on stream. When we find these kinds of things out, like economically, if we find them out at the same time as everybody else, it can come off incredibly negatively. Because we've been shocked. We've been taken aback. It's like, holy crap, what the hell just happened here? Wait, it costs this much now? And that creates a negative impression. If we, as a, part of the perks of the creator community is creator program is being able to have certain information ahead of time. We can actually formulate thoughts. We can ask questions, and we can have answers for the community that are going to say that. So we can, instead of having a knee-jerk reaction sometimes and maybe auto-impose a false opinion prior to process. I think that now this instance was not many people are very happy about this, even though if you really sit down and think about it, like you said, it makes a hell of a lot of sense to have done. So it's a double-edged sword.
And
because I get why they did it, but I just, just tell us next time. Just where's the little budget? You told us all of the variants that are coming, but you couldn't have told us that this shit's going to cost more.
Here's the other thing. This is the one thing I will say that's good, that I really love that they did this time. There's 2 gold tickets here, and there's 2 infinite tickets here. So I love that they added the extra. I know that we have an extra week this time. It's technically a 5-week plus. We got that extra week that, we didn't have last season. But the fact that now I can literally just grind, and even if I can't beat gold or whatever, right? Like, as a user or player, I can get 2 shots at infinite, I think was huge. I still think the big thing that they need is this infinite stuff. They need one other thing. They need like a mystery variant or something like that, where you could literally just, and it can be expensive as crap. It can be like, what's the top infinite one? All right, so it's 900. Like, you could make it 1,500. You could make it 2,000 tokens. 2,000 is maybe a little too much, but you can make it 1,500. And again, this is like 1,000. This was 500 last time. So again, going back to like these changes, that's double what it was last time to get these boosters. Makes perfect sense because I was just farming those boosters, but maybe for 2,000, right? Like you put a mystery variant and you can do that unlimited times because it's 2,000. But yeah, I am glad that they did add some of the stuff to the shop, but I agree with you. Like the fact that now, like I haven't even ran them yet, so I don't really know what the what that difference is now gold. You're going to get this like that 500, whatever. Is that going to feel like, it's fine. Now there's 1,000 because gold's going to give us so many more metals. But yeah, I agree with you. Communication.
Yeah. Just on that type of stuff, like you're going to change economy things. Just please don't let us find out the hard way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So with that said, I'm going to just quickly tell you why I've chosen to put Crystal in my deck of the week, because it is a combination that was introduced to me on Wednesday Night Snap. And even though you don't like it, clearly, I do. And for this deck, I decided to mess around with the idea of basically using her kind of similarly to how you would America Chavez, where you're reducing the pool, if you will. And that's the mindset I went with looking at to why I have her in the deck. And I created what I call the Phoenix Forge, which is my deck of the week. It is another Phoenix Force deck. First, the one I did in the played in the beginning of the week from Ratsu was a 20 rank deck in 4 hours. Absolutely fantastic. This one gave us another 10 in 20 games, another 10 ranks in 20 games. Super, super smooth. For our audio listeners, it's Iron Fist, Forge, Carnage, Dagger, Multiple Man, Venom, Shuri, Crystal, Nimrod, Phoenix Force, Arnim Zola, and Heimdall. And this deck revolves around the idea of having now 2 mechanics to build up on turn 5, where if you don't get your Shuri to double up, whether it's that Nimrod or that Phoenix Force, your backup plans is you do have your Forge available to you to build up that Phoenix Force as well, to bring back something back that you have destroyed. But it gives just as many safe lines of having the backup plan of Dagger to go ahead and take advantage of that Iron Fist. You can build up that Dagger. You can build up that Multiple Man with Shuri or with Forge the same way. You're still looking at your standard Phoenix Force lines, and I mean, Nimrod being destroyed in multiplicity on turn 6, whether it be via Arnim Zola, whether it be via Carnage and Venom. There's so many different lines in this deck, and has the ramping support that it needs, that if you don't get that key Multiple Man, line to work for Phoenix Force, which is the best line for Phoenix Force in the game right now, you still have other ramping options, whether it be a Dagger, a Carnage, a Forge, a Shuri. There's so many different ways that cards do ramp up to stack into 2 lanes in particular. So whether you go big with Heimdall or Zola or the double destroy mechanic on turn 6, you have multiple outs and all of the lines cross each other. Crystal is in here instead of America Chavez because Crystal going down on 4 is your backup to Shuri or Forge, where, hey, listen, you didn't get this to pull. Let's see if we can pull that final big play line of Nimrod into one of the destroy mechanics. And it actually does work, because trying to keep up with 12 power in 2 places on turn 6 is enough to justify them pulling their big card.
Yeah. I'm still, I think if this was the old Crystal, I could 100% get behind you on that. So I don't have the card I need in my hand, and let me reshuffle and try to get it with 3 draws. I'm not sold on the new Crystal. I like the Forge idea. Being able to use it, whether it's on Forge into Phoenix Force or even Forge into Nimrod if you have to go your Nimrod route. So I do like that change. So overall, this is similar into, some of the decks I've used with Phoenix Force. So I like the play pattern you're on. You still have your awesome Multiple Man play. You still have your backup Nimrod play, to where if you don't get the Phoenix Force route, you can still Nimrod with Venom, plus Carnage or something like that on turn 6. So, and Zola is definitely a good play. I know a lot of people our back and forth on Zola and Taskmaster, because if you get that Iron Fist, huge and huge and huge, and you Taskmaster. But I agree that like Zola gives you a couple more outs with your Nimrod and stuff, whereas Taskmaster, if you literally miss, your Taskmaster's terrible. So I like what you got here. I like the Heimdall backup, because worst case you got some move cards out there. So you're kind of like taking 2 decks, kind of almost a third deck, kind of putting them all together, but really 2 powerful decks, taking some of the most powerful cards to put them there. I like it, man.
It's a fun variation.
Yeah.
Especially if you're looking to try to maximize as many different versions of Phoenix Force decks as possible, get the most out of your season pass. Go ahead and try this one. And stay tuned for next week, because I am this weekend going to be tweaking and testing a Mr. Negative variation, but more to come on that personally on my own streams. So, good sir, Mr. DefaultDan, do you have any closing comments, things that you would like to mention? Where can they find yous, etc., before we wrap this podcast up?
No, I mean, I think Snap right now is in a pretty good, at least on ladder. I've only been playing ladder this whole week, but like, I think it's in a good spot. We've got a lot of really good metas forming. I don't feel like in ladder there's one particular deck right this second. Maybe we're first day of ladder there was, but like in these modes right now, I think we're in a good spot. So I'm looking forward to the rest of this month. We've got a lot of new cards coming in, including Jean Grey next week. We've got the Spotlight caches. Again, my take, I think they're good for all. The only people they're not good for is like the 4 people that have complete collections, like STG and 617. So, outside of that, I think they're good overall. Can't wait to see what the community thinks about it next week. But if you're interested in checking out, any of the other content that I'm putting out as well, come hang out with us over on Twitch. So twitch.tv/DefaultDan. We normally do this live on Mondays. Next Monday will not be live on this one, but the rest of them should be. If you want to hang out with us, I also stream other Snap stuff over there. And then Wednesday nights, we've got Wednesday Night Snap over on the Snap.fan Twitch page. So you can come hang out with us over there. Try out these new decks, try out these new cards as they drop. But yeah, outside of that, man, just enjoying the game right now. So
yeah, the game is in a really good spot. And I got to say thank you once again to Snap.fan, who is the official sponsor of this podcast. They have taken us in as their official podcast as well. So thank you so much once again to Snap.fan in that aspect. If you thoroughly enjoy this podcast, we invite you to head on over to ratemypodcast.com, ratethispodcast.com. All the fun rating sites, whether it's Apple, Google, etc. Take a look in the description of this podcast and let us know how we're doing. Ask us the fun questions, because we love answering them. So we appreciate that just as much. If you'd like to come hang out with me on stream, please join us, twitch.tv/ItsGuestGaming. I stream multiple times a week. It's always different every week, depending on life schedules, as we all well know, but I always try to post it up on Twitter, where I am incredibly active, and now also available on Threads. It's an S on Threads as well.
I think we all made that account.
The entire Snap community is moving over there, so we all should too. So come hang out with us. Otherwise, just shoot us a message in the Snap.fan Discord, and we'll be more than glad to talk to y'all over there as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, thank you so much for listening and watching to this episode of the Snapback Podcast, where you snap and we snap back. DefaultDan, say goodbye to the lovely people.
I'll take it easy.
Can you believe we've been recording for over 2 hours?
I know. This is going to be a long one.